political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 103.9 LI News Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. This is former County Executive Steve Levy welcoming you to our live show this afternoon. We're here from 2 to 4, and we're going to welcome your calls at 451-1039. Again, at 631 area code 451-1039. Here's the way we do it. I usually do a 20-minute preamble, talk about some interesting things that happened over the course of the week. And then we get into a discussion with a number of guests. We'll have legislator Tom Silmy in our second session. He's going to be talking about his new bill, which I think is fantastic, requiring that there be votes in the Suffolk County legislature before rather than after Election Day, which is presently the situation. We've run into some real problems in the past with that type of scenario where after the election, the legislature turns around and imposes a tax increase that's a surprise attack. We're going to have in the third session a gentleman from the community, Ken Greenberg, who is the CEO of Austin Williams Marketing. He's going to join us from the right and from the left. Elaine Turley, a former Democratic leader over in Smithtown. And then in the final session, we're going to be joined by Jim Morgo, who is my former chief deputy county executive, presently a consultant, has been a teacher, a county legislator, the head of the Long Island Housing Partnership. We're going to chat about a whole bunch of things relative to Long Island and beyond. So let me get into my rant for the first couple of moments here. A lot of things happened over the course of this past week. The one that sticks out in my mind prominently that was made national news was the president's decision, unilateral decision, to once again push off the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. There are a lot of things to talk about there, but the thing to me that went under the radar, and I'd like to get your input on this, ladies and gentlemen, did not get a great deal of attention, but to me it was remarkable. It was the first time that I can ever recall that a president or administration was telling employers how many people you had to employ. Because what happened is when the president decided that he was going to unilaterally delay the implementation of Obamacare, he simultaneously said that if you are a business that has 101, 102 employees, that you cannot lower the number of employees that you have on the books below 100 so that you're now underneath that threshold. I've never heard anything like it. Now, understand that it's really a threshold for 50, but what Obama was saying is from those from 50 to 100, we will push you out another several months or years, however long it's going to be. If you're 100, you're going to be into a whole new category. But this is the first time ever that I can recall in our nation's history, or maybe in the history of a democratic nation, where an administration is saying to a business, this is how many people you must have on your books. And if you try to lessen the number of people on your books, you're going to have to sign a statement to our administration, to the IRS and other bureaus, verifying under penalties of perjury that you did not let a person go because you wanted to come underneath the threshold of Obamacare. Now, that's unbelievable. You know, here is the government saying we're mandating that you abide by these rules, that you have to pay these extra taxes, these extra regulations, provide X, Y, and Z. But you cannot accommodate, you cannot maneuver things within your overall cost to lessen the number of employees within your establishment. That's unbelievable. This is something that is fascistic as far as it's fascist state as far as I'm concerned. I always thought a lot of these right wingers, many that you'd see on Fox TV, were over exaggerating the extent to which the administration is doing these type of socialistic measures. But I've never ever envisioned that an administration would say that you as a company must now keep a certain number of employees. And yes, you have to take on all these extra mandates, but if you want to lower your number of employees because you can't handle the extra expenses, you may go to jail. This is unbelievable. Now, one pundit on a newscast actually deemed this as Orwellian. It actually is. And I cannot believe there's not been the hue and cry from editorialists around the nation about that particular aspect. Now, Charles Krauthammer has said that the executives' attempt to unilaterally extend Obamacare without the approval of Congress is something you'd see in a banana republic, with what you see in the pattern now. You don't like immigration laws, just pass a, to say unilaterally as the executive, you're not going to enforce it anymore. When it comes to the minimum wage, you want to see a higher minimum wage. So do I, as a matter of fact. But you don't want to wait for the states to do it. You don't want to wait for Congress to do it. You unilaterally tell every contractor out there that you must now pay your employees $10.10 an hour. Now, if I ever did that as a Suffolk County executive, my next guest, Tom Sulmy, who's a legislator, will tell you what the legislature would have done to me. Even if he might have agreed with me on the substance, he'd say, there's no way you can do that unilaterally. I remember when we put in a resolution that said if you are a county contractor, you have to show us that you're not hiring from the illegal underground economy. You're not hiring illegal aliens. You're not. That we're making sure that you're paying your workers' comp and your health benefits. I couldn't do that unilaterally. I had to get the legislature to go along with me. Yet we're seeing in Washington this being done again and again and again. Now you're seeing it with marijuana laws. There are some states that are loosening up. Fine, if you want to do that as a state. But now the Attorney General is actually considering, stopping any federal enforcement on that. Again, unilaterally, even though you have laws on the books. Now, as far as the Obamacare delay is concerned, I think it's really interesting because now I'm seeing a lot of Republicans who are going crazy over this. But you know what? You reap what you sow, baby. And I wrote an op-ed to the Washington Times a couple of months ago when Ted Cruz was closing down the government to try to delay Obamacare. And I scratching my head and said, what are you doing? What is the purpose of this? Number one, you're going to lose on the merits. You're never going to be able to stop it this way. You've got to get enough votes. You can never get it. Well, we want to make a statement. Well, yeah, you made a statement, all right. You now gave a life preserver to the Democrats and to the president to now say, I want to delay it. Why, as a Republican, would you want to delay this? Listen, let it go through. One of two things is going to happen. If it works, that's good for the nation. You'll have a lot of these uninsured people who will now get insurance, and it may be a good program, et cetera, et cetera. If it's going to fail, let it fail. And then by the time 2014 rolls around, you'll have the public saying, we want to change this. The only way to change this is to get a Republican Congress. Let's do it now. Instead, you have given the lifeline to the president, and the Democrats say, okay, you wanted a delay. We're giving you a delay. And now you're going to see all the shrapnel and all the fallout from this plan materialize, if it does, after 2014. And now what the president is saying is not only after 2014, but we're going to push it off till the next presidential election as well. What a bunch of fools these Republicans on the Hill have been in throwing this life preserver. Just don't get it. In a couple of sessions later, we're going to be talking about the Affordable Health Care Act and, what is it that we can be doing to lower costs here in the United States. We pay 2 times per patient as is paid in other industrialized nations. Let's have a conversation about that. What is the solution? If it's not Obamacare, There's got to be something else. You can't allow 45 million people to go uninsured every year. There's got to be a solution. The Republicans really haven't come up with articulated good solutions in the past. Let's talk about what those alternatives can be, what those solutions can be. So we're welcoming your calls here. You're listening to Steve Levy at Speak Out Long Island, 631-451-1039. We want to hear from you on that issue or many of the others that will come up during the course of this session. Okay, let's shift gears locally. Blew my stack yesterday. Saw this article where, I don't know if you saw it as well. I hope you felt the same way I did. The guy who was commissioner of police in Nassau County for just 2 years, Thomas Dale, okay, 2 years, cashes out with a severance package of $58,000. Folks, I'm not making that up. Let me repeat that. Not $5,800. $58,000 for 2 years on the job. This is his unused sick and vacation time. Are you as ticked off as I am about this? How outrageous. Where is the outrage? I read the article and I saw one of the county legislators in Nassau who was quoted. He didn't express outrage over the size of the package, over how can this be? Why is this allowed? His outrage was, oh, this was terrible that a guy in management was getting $58,000 while the poor officers on the line had to have a wage freeze over the last 3 years. A wage freeze as though they were underpaid. The highest paid police forces in the world are here on Long Island, and all this county legislator can think about was the poor guy on the line who has a $150,000 salary who wasn't going to get a wage increase that year. No outrage over the fact that all of these guys, whether in a management, in a union, from top to the bottom, are getting these outrageous cash outs. It's not unusual for some of these long-term members of the department who've been there 20, 30 years to get, hold on to your seats, folks, hold on, not $100,000, not $200,000, not $300,000, not $400,000, $500,000, $500,000 in severance pay for unused vacation and sick time. Who in the private sector can identify with this? Anybody? Do you get paid for sick days that you don't use? All right, I get it. Your vacation. You didn't use your vacation. Give the guy some credit for his vacation. But that's how outrageous these contracts have become that are really the result of giveaways from decades past and mandatory arbitration where the discretion is taken away from management and you have these arbitrators who give away the store every time. So now I can tell you about Suffolk County. 26 sick days a year, folks. 26 sick days. Who the heck needs 26 sick days? If you're chronically ill, that's a whole different point. 25 X days. These are just extra days off in between your shifts. 6 personal days. Up to 6 weeks vacation. 13 days paid for holidays, including Lincoln's birthday. Who the heck gets Lincoln's birthday anymore? Okay, folks in the private sector, you've got to understand how crazy. You wonder what your taxes are, what they are, $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year. It's because of this nonsense. $58,000 for a cash out after just working for 2 years. You should be mad as hell, and you should be calling in. So how do we fix this? Well, number one, you got to get rid of mandatory arbitration, for the future at least. Call up your state legislators and tell them enough is enough. Get rid of this monstrosity that has given us these crazy, crazy contracts. And I hate to say it, but the only other saving grace we might have is to get a control board, like they have in Nassau County, but still I don't think it's gone far enough. Or maybe even, dare I say it, do what they did in Detroit. It's a bankruptcy. No, I'm not saying it's a bankruptcy in New York. Our alternative to that is the control board. You remember when New York City was on the brink of disaster in the 70s, the only thing that kept their heads above water was the control board. And what did that do? It was state authority given to the locals to say, these contracts which have gotten out of control, We're stopping them. We're putting them on hold. We're rewriting them. It's an extreme measure. You don't do this but for the most extreme circumstances. But is it not extreme when you have a guy who was working for 2 years in county government who's walking out the door with $58,000 in unused sick and vacation time? Absolutely crazy. Now, when I was county executive, I was able to negotiate with the sheriffs and the corrections a very reasonable contract, which gave a slight increase in salary, but also ended those cash outs. And now you have what you have in New York City. Unlimited sick if you really need it, and if it's abused, you're fired. Okay, but no more. It's just going to be like the private sector. You have your sick days for when you're sick. If you don't use them, they're not a cash bonus. We need more of that. But you can't impose it unilaterally. Maybe if I were President Obama, I could impose it unilaterally, or our local guys can impose it unilaterally. He seems to do everything unilaterally. But here you get your butt kicked. If you try to do that unilaterally as a county executive, we really do need the state to help on that. Now, that doesn't excuse the present county executive who I think gave away the store in this latest negotiation with the PBA. I tried to make all of these savings through civilianization. I put the sheriffs on the highways that saved us $12 million a year. Yeah, you can have it back. We had police officers making $170,000 a year flying our helicopters to emergency medical situations. Well, why'd you have to have 2 cops in there? Why couldn't you have a pilot, maybe paid $90,000 a year, and an EMT getting maybe $50,000 a year? I made the change. This new administration changed it back. So unfortunately, we seem to be going backwards rather than forward. That's why you need some kind of state intervention to end this madness. And if you have any comments on this, we want to hear from you on Speak Out Long Island. This is Steve Levy, the former Suffolk County executive. It's 451-1039. We want to hear from you. Another thing I read about, which you might have as well over the past week, Nassau County County Attorney's Office took a shot from Newsday in this article this past week where it was a very critical article of the former county attorney having brought some lawsuits going on to the offensive. Usually a county attorney, a county administration is defensive. You wait to be sued and you respond. In this case, there were 2 particular pieces of litigation that I thought Nassau County was right on in bringing. And actually, we joined them in Suffolk County. It shouldn't be criticized because a judge made a lame decision. The first one was on the MTA tax. Nassau, Suffolk had every right to sue Governor Patterson and the state legislature in imposing this tax, which is going to benefit primarily New York City at the expense of our outer boroughs, where our businesses, not just the commuters, mind you, it wasn't a commuter tax. It was a tax on our businesses having to pay a higher payroll tax to fund the city subways. We thought it was unconstitutional. It was kind of like one man, one vote, no representation, no taxation without representation kind of a thing. And plus, it was something that required a home rule message. We actually won on the lower court. It was actually my law firm, Campolo, Middleton and McCormick, that brought that lawsuit for our client, Classic Coach, and Bill Schoolman. We won on a lower level on the merits. It went up to the higher levels. I really think it was a political decision that the upper level said, well, if we uphold this decision, we're not going to have any money for the system. So instead of saying, hey, you guys in the city pay more money for it, they left it intact. It was wrong. But it was right for Nassau to bring that case. And at the very least, by bringing that lawsuit, you know what they did? Along with Suffolk, we brought attention to the matter, and the state legislature intervened and at least modified this tax. So it's only imposed on the bigger businesses. The smaller businesses got a waiver. So that helped a lot of people. It was only because that lawsuit was brought. And then was the second lawsuit that they were criticized on, and that was to bring suit against the new voting machines, which I think is a bunch of nonsense. I brought that lawsuit as well. I thought it was a good suit because a couple of idiots in Florida couldn't read a hanging Chad in the 2000 presidential election. Congress swoops in and says, we want everyone to go electronic. So what happens in New York? $200 to $300 million is paid by you, the taxpayer, to scrap our old lever machines, which were perfectly fine. All that money goes down the rat hole to create this new electronic system that confused a lot of people, that is subject to potential hacking, that does nothing to make this system better. It doesn't improve the integrity of the system. If anything, it might lower it. We never had, did you ever remember a problem with a lever machine? You had to have a revote. You go back, you look at the back of the machines. You always had a Democrat and Republican looking at the results. You know what has to happen now with these new machines? They have to print a paper ballot for 110% of every registered voter within that jurisdiction. You know how many people voted in an off-year election in Suffolk County? Try 25%. 25% of the people vote. They have to have paper ballots for 110% of the population. Absolutely nuts. They said, oh, the state will cover all the costs. Well, that state money is our money, but more than that, because these new machines are bigger, Suffolk County had to spend $1.5 million in building an extension on its Board of Elections because they had to now refrigerate these and climate control these new systems. Absolutely crazy. I think Nassau County was right on to be in that lawsuit with us. We won some, we lost some, we lost more than we won on that, but I think it was the right thing to do. What a colossal waste of money that was. We want to hear your opinion on this stuff, folks. It's 631-451-1039. Call in. Our next segment, which is going to start in a few minutes, we're going to have Legislator Tom Silmy on with us, a real fiscal conservative who's got the right idea. He wants to make sure that when your county legislature votes on the budget that affects your property taxes, that they make that vote before election, not after election, as is presently the case. They've screwed us a number of times in the past where they went around on their campaign saying it was going to be a tax freeze. Guess what? Day after the election, they raised taxes. It's wrong. Silmy's trying to stop it. We want to listen to him. We want to listen to you. Be with us. Okay, welcome back. Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. I'm Steve Levy, the former Suffolk County executive. Welcome to part 2 of our program. We air from 2 to 4 on Saturdays live, so that means you're welcome to call in with your phone calls at 631-451-1039. It's easy to remember. The 1039 is the same spot on your dial, 103.9 FM for Long Island News Radio. Okay, we're here in the second segment live, and in the studio, we have a good friend and a great public servant, Legislator Tom Silmy from Islip. County Legislator, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And I say this quite often to Tom, and I don't tell him just because I'm stroking him, but, there's just a handful of people who I've come across in my career who I think are the real deal when it comes to fiscally conservative perspectives, and I think Tom is certainly one of them. He's done a great job sticking up for the taxpayers in his short legislative career. You were a legislative aide before being elected, correct, Tom?
Years ago in the late 90s, yes.
Yeah, so you've seen some good times and bad times.
I have.
With the economy and county government. So The reason I wanted to have you here, I absolutely love your package of bills. I wish that we would have had this in place when I was county executive, and we served together for a short time there, and you were a vote that I could always count on to do the right thing for the taxpayers. But one thing that ticked me off one particular year, I was always, working hard to bring in the lowest budget possible for our taxpayers. It's my motto was, all the programs in the world don't mean a hill of beans if you can't afford to live here in the first place. And we lived that. We did a good job over 8 years, and one particular year, it was an election year, I put in a tax freeze. It might have even been a tax cut. It was at least a tax freeze budget that we submit, the executive, in September. The legislature takes it, modifies it, does stuff with it, but doesn't really come out with its ultimate proposal as to how it's going to change the executive's budget till very, very late in the process. And what happened was the then presiding officer, Bill Lindsay, went out telling the public when they were running for re-election and his entire team, we've got a tax freeze. Well, it was my tax freeze that I put through. If the legislature adopted it, it would be a tax freeze. But he puts it out there that it's a tax freeze. They will get reelected. The very next day, they amend the amendments come out, and we see it was a tax increase, and they vote for it. Not everybody did vote for it, but they vote for it, and they just basically said, you know what, to the taxpayers. It's wrong. You saw that was wrong, and you've been trying to change it for a number of years. Let us know what your bill does, please.
So there are three problems with the process of the budget adoption process in Suffolk County. As you indicated, the county executive releases the budget publicly in the middle of September, and the public and the legislature and everybody can get a chance to look through it and read it and understand it. At that point, our budget review office takes the budget and kind of goes through it with a fine-tooth comb, eventually comes out with a report to the legislature, and sometime within the months before we pass the budget, which is typically, as you indicated, the day after Election Day in November, the legislature assembles what's called a budget working group, and it's a group of 9 legislators appointed by the presiding officer. They take those 9 legislators and they put them in the basement of the legislature in a closed-door room. It literally is the basement of the legislature, in a closed-door room. And if you're not one of the 9, you can't be in the room with the rest of those legislators. Otherwise, they would violate the open meetings laws.
And that would open it up to the press.
And so you'd have to do it in public. So they take these 9 legislators, they put them in the room, and there for a month or two, they discuss an amendment to the budget, which is typically an omnibus amendment, which for those out there...
Meaning the whole kitchen sink goes into one bill up or down.
Exactly. Literally 1,000 or more line items in the county executive's proposed budget will get amended as a result of this omnibus budget amendment.
And by the way, folks, you're listening to legislator Tom Sulmy from Islip. You're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. You're welcome to call in and chime in at 451-1039. Okay.
So they take this budget, they work on it in the basement of the legislature, and they come out with this omnibus, everything but the kitchen sink budget amendment 2 days or less before we vote on the bill.
And I'll tell you, I never recall it being 2 days. I recall it being 2 hours before you vote on it.
In fact, in 2011, when I was reelected for my first time to office, we got the budget amendment at about 10 p.m. Election Day night. Mm-hmm. I can remember celebrating with friends and looking at my smartphone and seeing the amendment come across on my smartphone.
Mm-hmm. You were going to go out for a beer or to unwind a little bit, and now you got to read a 1,000-page document.
We vote on the amendment, as we have, as far as I know, forever, the day after Election Day. Mm-hmm. So not only is the process by which the amendment is constructed a private process where the public is not included, where legislators are not included, but then they release the budget amendment a day or two or less prior to the vote, and then they vote on it the day after Election Day. The entire process, to me, is broken.
And it reminds me of Nancy Pelosi saying, we'll find out what's in the bill after we vote for it. But that's really what happens in many cases in Suffolk County with this archaic process. It's not the fault of any particular legislator. You can't physically do it. You have to rely on the staff from Budget Review to give, and the presiding officer to give you this cursory kind of review of what it was. If you were in those basement meetings, maybe you know a little bit more than the next guy, but you still don't know all the details. You haven't read all the details. But the worst part of it, Tom, is not only the surprise, you thought you were getting this, you're only getting this, you thought you were getting a freeze, you're getting a tax increase. It's the fact that the public has about 6 weeks, 8 weeks to critically analyze the proposal that comes from the executive. We have to propose our budget September. Okay, third Friday in September. That's a lot of time for Budget Review to analyze it, for the public, for the press. No one gets to analyze what the legislature's voting on, let alone the legislators, the public, the groups that are in or out of that budget, the taxpayers. You don't really know what the heck is in it until after it's passed, right?
That is exactly right. And that's why I've proposed a number of changes. So I have what's called a Taxpayer Awareness Act, which does three things. It says, number one, the whole process should take place out in the open, where everybody can participate. Every legislator, all 18 of us, will have an equal ability to input and to construct this amendment. And the public, by the way, can come and listen to the discussion and contribute to the discussion. All of those agencies that you talked about, all those constituencies that are impacted by the budget, can actually join us in the process of figuring out how we're going to spend $2.8 billion of a budget. So number one, do it in public. Number two, release the amendment no less than 5 days prior to a vote, so that all of us legislators and the public can have an opportunity to read the amendment and actually understand what's going on in there. And number three, the budget amendment should be voted on, the budget should be voted on, and i.e. the taxes should be voted on, no later than the day before Election Day, not the day after Election Day.
Tom, was there another provision, it might have been separate from this, but I remember a provision that, and I loved it, that would require that if you're putting in an addition to this omnibus, that your name has to be attached to it. Because what had happened is the smorgasbord that was developed, it became a free-for-all. And everybody wanted their little district project going in. And they got, you put your pork in, I'll put my pork in, and we'll all wink and nod and vote yes together. And there was no accountability. Well, who put that in there and why? It was cover for everyone, and that's how you got this budget creep that would go up. And I always thought that if you wanted to put an extra $50,000 on for an organization, you should identify yourself as the person who's putting in that amendment. Do you recall any legislation like that?
I don't recall that specifically, but you've identified another problem with the process, which I'm looking at as well, and that is that in this year's proposed budget, for example, or when they proposed the budget in 2013 for 2014, the county executive eliminated millions of dollars of funding to not-for-profit agencies that provide numerous services to the residents of Suffolk County, and leaving it then to the legislature to put that money back into the budget. So we have agencies that are providing homeless services. We have agencies that are providing all kinds of other social services, health services, a variety of different things. And we have legislators, individual legislators, in a private room deciding what money to put in there for what. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you think if you had money in a budget for health-related issues, for health clinics, for example, wouldn't you think that it would be appropriate for the health department, the folks that live and breathe health every day, to actually, develop a comprehensive strategy of how we're going to effectively spend X amount of money, rather than have legislators in a room decide where they're going to allocate, $1 million here, or $500,000 here, or $50,000 here.
Yeah, and you're right on with that. Now, the advocates will say, well, we had our hearings with the county executive, and hopefully our ideas were incorporated with his budget, or thereafter the legislature held budget hearings. But the fact is, in the end, they're never really going to know what the bottom line is until that day after the election, just like you. But the other big problem that I've seen is now the budget is done. Okay, it's voted on. Goes back to the county executive. This present county executive really doesn't exercise a veto that much. In my case, I was vetoing right and left and center just to bring the spending down. And what would happen thereafter, as you recall, is I would put in all these vetoes on these line items to shave all of these increases down. So we take that 3% tax increase that the legislature through Presiding Officer Lindsay put in, and we bring it back down to a freeze. I want to see that all of those individual line items are voted on individually on their own merits. Instead, what the presiding officer has traditionally done is say, no, we're going to take them all in one fell swoop, one vote up or down. And that puts legislators in a vice, because you may have some things that you think are very, very important for a health center, for something in your district, or just for the county welfare in general. That's going to go down if the whole thing goes down. You don't want your stuff to go down, yet you don't want the other frivolous stuff to go in. So now all these guys are in this dilemma, in this corner. I either have to go yes for the whole thing or no for the whole thing. And it's a scheme that has worked over the years because traditionally it's been an overwhelming override time after time. I know Legislator DeMauro, one of the conservative Democrats on the legislature, has put in a bill in the past to require the line item veto. And I wonder what your thoughts were on that and if you think it's going to come up again this year.
I haven't spoken with Legislator DeMauro. I'll have to look and see what he's done in the past to see if it's something that I want to embrace. So I don't know whether or not it'll come up this year, but it sounds like something that I would certainly support.
Well, I'll tell you that budget process, it's broken, and I'm glad we have a guy like you who has an open mind and has the initiative to try to change it, because I think we both agree taxpayers have a right to know who they're voting for on election day, and that person is not going to turn around and do 180 degrees opposite the next day after election that he said the day before election. Listen.
You know, it's interesting. I've been criticized for my position on this, and the criticism is that I've never sat in this budget working group, or I've never sat outside the room, which is an option. You can sit outside as a legislator, I can sit outside the room and wait until another legislator leaves, and I can. It's not fair representation as far as I'm concerned. But my point is always, you don't have to know that a tub of sewage stinks. You don't have to dive into that tub to know that it stinks. You just know that it stinks.
Right. And by the way, I think Nassau County does now vote before election. So, and they're not exactly a model we want to look up to, but in this case, they are. I think so.
Well, there may be hope then for Suffolk County.
Exactly. Well, folks, you are listening to County Legislator Tom Silmy on the Speak Out Long Island show with Steve Levy. You are welcome to chime in at any point, 631-451-1039. We're here through 4 o'clock. I want to shift gears a little bit, Tom. There's been a lot of talk locally about what's going to happen with the state Senate, and it is so darn important to Long Island. We saw a couple of years ago when the balance of power in the state Senate shifted for years and years, for decades actually. There was a block of power on Long Island from the Republican Senate. And whether you liked them or didn't like them, we had representation from this block because everything had to go through them. If you were the governor, if you were the liberal Shelley Silver, and the state assembly couldn't do anything without approval from that block. So they were a tempering agent. That changed a few years ago. The Democrats took control. It became city-centric, and then you saw this MTA tax imposed. Thereafter, it got changed back again because those Democrats who were elected lost office. Now we've got two vacancies. Chuck Fuschillo, Republican senator, Nassau and Suffolk, gone. Lee Zeldin already said he's going to be leaving to run for the United States Congress. Big shift here can take place. As it is, the Republicans do not really have an absolute majority. They actually are slightly in a minority, but they fused a coalition with some independent Democrats, so they do hold power. If one of those two seats are lost, everything changes for Long Island. Now, there's been a lot of talk about what's happening with the Zeldin seat. On the Republican side, we've seen a lot of folks come forward. We've seen the name of Anthony Sempa, councilman in Islip. We've seen Tim Mazie, the councilman in Brookhaven. We've seen Dean Murray, the former assembly person. By the way, is Tom Silmy in that district?
Tom Silmy is not in that district.
No, you're Phil Boyle's district.
That's correct.
He's not going anywhere for a while, I don't think. Okay, that's too bad. But the Democrats, the only name I had heard previous to this week was Paul Pontieri, who'd be a very formidable guy. I think he's a great mayor. He was on here at the show last week. He's not going to do it. But the name that popped up, and Rick Brand and Newsday did an article on this, and this is very interesting. It's got its pros and cons. Adrian Esposito, who's the head of the Citizens Campaign for the Environment. And, folks, if you want to chime in on this, call 451-1039, Long Island Talk Radio. I personally think it's very dangerous to have, as it was called, environmental, was it pioneer or definitely an advocate, some might say extremist, crusader, a green crusader, as Brand called it. I think she's a very intelligent woman, very good at what she does. I appointed her, actually, to the Long Island Planning Commission because I felt she was a strong advocate but wasn't a real crazy nutcase like a Dick Amper. Dick Amper is just out of control, environmental extremist who nothing is ever enough. And he's a bomb thrower. He's not reasonable, very hard to work with. she's a little more reasonable, but she still, has her very myopic view of the environment. And I agree with her on I'd say 90% of her environmental perspective. But now you're talking about running for a position where you have to be a balancing agent, okay? I've always said it's real easy to be an an advocate, because all you have to care about is what's on your scorecard. I got these 3 or 4 things to worry about. I don't really have to worry about whether young people have housing. I don't have to worry about what the tax rate is on my neighbors. I don't have to worry about what the job situation is. All I have to do is check off the things on my punch card, and I've done my job. When you morph from that type of advocate to a representative of all the people, which hat are you going to wear? I know the problems I had with Bill Lindsay was he was a union leader. We were actually in meetings in that basement in the legislature where he would say, hey, as a former union leader, I just can't do this. And I said, hey, take that hat off and put your taxpayer hat on. It's hard for folks to do that. I really question whether she will be able to wear that taxpayer hat. I think it's going to be just the green hat all the time. And they're not always mutually exclusive. Sometimes they are. So I was wondering, what do you think about that whole Senate situation, the race, where it's going to go? What do you think of something like this where an advocate runs, like Carolyn McCarthy had run as a gun advocate? You now have Esposito maybe running as an environmental advocate. What's your thoughts? How will it affect Long Island?
Well, I mean, certainly the Republican majority or pseudo majority right now in the Senate is critically important to Long Island, to our taxpayers, and I would argue to a variety of issues here on Long Island. If we cede control to the Democrats in the Senate, my opinion is that you'll start to see New York City driving the discussion in Albany, because they have so many members in the Assembly from New York City. And I think that's bad for Long Island. We already send quite a bit more to Albany from Long Island than what we get back. And I'm afraid that if the majority were to shift substantively in the state Senate, that we would be in worse shape. So
you generally have a problem with an advocate like this. I don't know if I want to say extremist. Let's say a crusader like this on one issue, holding that position.
Not necessarily. I mean, we all have the things that are important to us when we run for office. When I ran for office, it was government dysfunction, and it was the attitude towards business that really got me involved and got me interested in running and making a difference. So we all have our priorities. And certainly I have great respect and admiration for Adrienne and what she's done with Citizens Campaign and her focus on environmental issues, which are critically important to us here on Long Island. So I don't fear for that specifically. However, I do think that in her job now as executive director of Citizens Campaign, she's able to be that voice. She's able to look at things from not single-mindedly, but more focused on environmental issues.
And not be distracted, because maybe she could be more effective in her role.
Exactly. So my thinking is that she's more effective in her role as executive director of Citizens Campaign, where she's done a good job at shedding light on issues and advocating for environmental issues.
And by the way, as Chairman John Laval said, if you run and lose, you're basically over as an advocate. I wouldn't say over, but you got a lot of chink in the armor, because now people, when they hear you, is it with a political agenda in mind? It could really sour whatever luster was on that medal.
I think you're right. And she runs and she gets elected, and now she has all of these other issues that she has to be concerned with at the same time, not the least of which is, the opposing point of view and the issues on taxation and so it's going to be very, very interesting this year to see how the races pan out. I think not only is that Senate seat interesting and the whole complexion of the Senate interesting, but the congressional race is interesting as well, and really hope that Lee Zeldin does a good job in his race, because we desperately need his voice in Washington.
Well, we need you in the county legislature, Tom, but I'm hoping that there'll be an opening real soon where you can move up as well. Thanks, Tom Silmy. Folks, join us on our next session where we'll have some great guests. You can call at 451-1039.
Political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 1039 LI News Radio.
Hey, welcome back to our show, folks. This is Steve Levy, former county executive. You're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy here on 103.9 Long Island News Radio. You are welcome to call in over the course of this segment, 451-1039. And we have two great guests, an in-studio guest, Ken Greenberg, who is the founder and CEO of Austin Williams Advertising and Marketing. I always like to get local people where we can. Sometimes I've had, national figures like Robert Zimmerman on our show, Ed Cox, the head of the New York State Republican Committee. Robert Zimmerman's a National Democratic Committee person. We had Chris Hahn last week. But I also like to have just local business persons to have their perspective on things. And to balance out Ken, we have from the left a good friend, a great lawyer up in Smithtown, former Democratic leader in Smithtown, former candidate for office, Elaine Turley. You're joining us today, Elaine. Hello. Elaine, welcome to the show.
Hello, Steve. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. I know we had a scheduled discussion on this show a while back, and we got snowstormed out. But this time, we're doing fine. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to talk to you.
So listen, there's so many things that happened over the last week that we could have a great conversation about. And I'm talking about Ken Greenberg from Austin Williams Business out here in Suffolk, and Elaine Turley, who's a former Democratic chair in Smithtown. And Elaine, I got to start off. What the heck is happening in Smithtown? Pat Vecchio, is he in or out? What's going on out there? And why can't the Democrats slip through and get a seat over there?
Well, the issue of whether or not the Democrats can be elected in Smithtown is another issue right now. Today we're talking appointments and why Republicans can't live up to their responsibilities when they are elected, right? Mm-hmm. Thursday night at the Senior Citizen Center, I believe, was the town board meeting where the three sitting members of the current town board in Smithtown did vote to appoint Supervisor Pat Vecchio or reappoint Pat Vecchio to his seat as town supervisor.
Now, you have to agree that was the proper thing to do, I guess, since the people have spoken. What is your thought of that?
Absolutely. Right. When I heard about this, I first of all, it should have never happened. It should have never happened for a number of reasons, and I think the responsibility can be spread out among everybody involved here. I want to say that I think that Vincent Polio failed in his job as town clerk.
That's the clerk. I know in the county legislature,
failed in his job as town clerk. He needed to let the supervisor and town councilwoman Lynn Nowick. He needed to remind them that they needed to sign their oath of office.
Well, you know what I think they're going to do now, Elaine? They're going to do what the county legislature does. On our swearing-in day, the clerk is there with the card, and we would sign in so it wouldn't be forgotten. That's probably a lesson learned, and they're going to go that route in the future. But I'll let you hold 1 second.
But let me ask you this, Steve. Do you think if the clerk wasn't there, you would have forgotten to sign it either? I mean,
probably not. But I guess they were.
Vecchio, 36 years. Lynn Nowick, 20 years. There's some responsibility there too.
Well, I guess you're right on that. I guess they're so used to someone knocking on their door to do it for them that the question, as Vecchio was saying, was the fix in? Hey, we'll never know. But I think they've learned a lesson for the future. Let's segue here for a second. We've got so many things that happened over the past week here. I thought one of the hilarious things was the debate going on now between Cuomo and de Blasio, where de Blasio is trying to out-left everyone. He really wants to be the spokesperson for the left, not only in the state of New York, but I think nationally. He's really going hog wild. Everything from he wants pre-K, he wants taxes on the upper 1%, he wants his own minimum wage for just New York City. He wants paid family leave. He wants identification cards for illegal aliens. Boy, this guy is living up to his word as being a liberal's liberal. But Ken, what is this going to do to New York City? Now we got Andrew Cuomo kind of in a tiff with him. I think this is good for Cuomo. I think this moderates Cuomo and helps him look like the more moderate of the two, even though he's been veering left on a lot of things. In fact, his poll numbers are coming back up into the low 60s. I think it's a result of de Blasio going crazy on the left. What do you think? Then I want to hear from you, Elaine.
I think it makes Cuomo look like a conservative, this guy. He's completely out there. And some of the things he's doing cannot at all help the city. If you look at where the city income comes from, it's from that upper 1%. I forget what percentage it's a twisted, sick percentage of.
I know nationally it's about 40% of our tax revenue comes from the 1%. I know when I was in the state legislature, we wanted to fund a lot of programs for the poor. And you know where that money came from? Bonuses on Wall Street. And we would pray, I hope they have a good year. I hope they have a good year. Because if they have a bad year, we don't get the money. We can't get that money to the poor. And that's something that, the crazy liberals out there, they never factor in.
Right. I'm just shocked at this assault on the charter schools that he's making. I mean, those kids are very often in poorer neighborhoods. They have a shot here. I've heard things on the opposite end of the spectrum where, hey, maybe we should just give everybody the $24,000 it costs to educate a kid, let them pick their own school, and competition would enter in the thing. But just to shut down these charter schools or make it so difficult for them.
Well, he's bought lock, stock, and barrel by the unions.
We know that.
Let's face that. Elaine, chime in on any of these things. The whole Cuomo de Blasio feud, the whole thing on pre-K, the minimum wage, the charter schools. Do you think this guy is too far left, and is it going to hurt New York City and hurt Democrats down the line, or is it actually going to help their brand?
I'm not sure it's going to hurt Democrats in New York City. I think New York City is a liberal city. I think New York City supports, many people in New York City support these kinds of measures. I think a lot of us support, by the way, pre-K, publicly funded pre-K. I think it's a great idea. Do I think de Blasio's taking a little too liberal stand? I don't like his talk and pitting the wealthy against the middle class or the lower income, citizens. I don't like that class talk. We've had a lot of that over the last few years.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because what you're saying is counter to the whole Democratic game plan right now from Axelrod and Obama on. It looks like it is to pit one segment against the other. You're the victim and you're the exploiter. But before I ask you to answer on that, I've got Derek. Can you hold 1 second, Elaine?
Phrase it that way.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I want to hear from Derek. He's calling in, and then we're going to go back to Elaine. Derek, welcome to the show. Are you with us, Derek? Hold on, we're gonna get him. Having some technical difficulties here. One more time, Derek. Can you hear us, Derek?
Hi, Mr.
Here he is.
My name is Derek Thomas. I work with civil rights activist Bob Zellner.
Okay.
And I also work with my stepfather was Gary Williams from NAACP.
Sure.
In Warner Heights.
Sure.
And I just want to thank you. I listen to your show pretty much all the time, and I respect your words, and it just keeps me going,
Hey, Derek, that's great. I appreciate that. We want it to be entertaining. People don't have to agree with us all the time, and we try to get balanced. That's why we have Elaine and Ken on this show right now. We want to get the perspective of folks. We thank you for your good words. We hope you keep on listening. Anything you want to chime in on some of the issues on this day that we talked about so far? Or you just want to give us a nice bit of encouragement?
I just have to give the encouragement. You guys are the top, you're the head, so I'm just a listener.
Thanks. And by the way, Gary Williams was a heck of an advocate. He was the head of the Brookhaven NAACP for a while, and a good man, a very untimely passing, but he's definitely in our memory. And thank you, Derek. Keep listening, okay?
See, Steve,
Thank you so much, Mr. Levy.
Thank you, buddy. All right, Ken, go ahead, and then I got to get back to Elaine because I cut her off.
Well, actually, I wanted to agree with Elaine on. I think it's bad that we try to pit the classes or create this class warfare that I don't really think has to be there. If you think about, if they say income inequality grew, if you had people that 10 or 20 years ago were making X dollars, and one guy was making, let's say, 30, one guy was making 330. That difference was 300, and they both doubled in 10 years. The guy now makes 60 that was making 30.
Well, that was the Kennedy line, a rising tide
Well,
floats all
that
boats, right?
$60,000 guy might be happy. Now, we don't know what inflation happened, and there's always that thing. But the guy that doubled that was making 330 is making 660. So now the difference is 600. The difference doubled too. So, of course, we can say it's simple math when you say, well, it's a bigger gap than ever was before. That's because everything's going up.
But now Elaine was actually surprising me. She's a Democrat leader, and back to you, Elaine, actually saying she disagrees with this pitting one group against another. And what I had said, Elaine, is I see this as a concerted diversion effort from the Democrats on a national, now on a state level. Hey, if the economy's going not too well, if Obamacare isn't going not too well, change the subject. And you know, there's 99% here, there's 1% there. Pit everyone against the 1%, and we can pick up votes that way. And, you know, just wanted to, I cut you off where you were in the middle of your response. Elaine? Did we lose you with, are you still with us, Elaine? I think we might have lost you. We're going to give you a chance to call back. But in the meantime, you know, I really think that's what it is. It's all about a diversion. And, you know, Chris Christie said it the other day. Do you want mediocrity? Yeah, if we told everybody you could all make the same amount of money and it's going to be the same for the rest of your life, would you accept that? Most people say no, because we want to be able to grow. My point is they've tried that. It's called North Korea. And if you just look at the difference between North Korea and South Korea, I mean, certainly there's far less equality in South Korea than North Korea. But North Korea, they're all equally poor. Right. They're equally starving.
Yeah, Steve, it never seems that the people at the bottom get like lifted up. It's like there's always this like, let's suck it from people on the top to push it to the bottom, which traps them partly, because if you're on assistance and if you're capable of working, you know, you start to work, they start taking away your assistance. So a part of you doesn't want to jeopardize that. So you're kind of trapped there. It's not a positive thing.
Elaine,
Hi, can you hear me
she's
now?
back. Okay, we're back with Elaine. So I had cut.
I almost thought it was a conspiracy. I was talking, I wasn't coming through. Nobody could hear me.
The first time it was the snow, Elaine. Now we got you with the fake blackout. But all right, we got you back. Thanks.
Steve, you're talking about diversionary tactics by the left and by the Democrats and by President Obama. You can see it from the other perspective too. That I think there's some diversionary tactics from the right. And I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to disagree with what Ken just said, that we don't have any incentives for people to do better. I don't think that's the issue. I think, number one, we got to provide the supports for people to do better. We have to provide educational funding. We've got to provide supports. Look, I think one of the most important things we can do is fund public education. Let's go back to preschool. Let's go back to public school. Let's go back to college.
All right, let's talk about that for a second.
Talk about myself.
Let's talk about it. But first, I want to agree with you. You know, Republicans do it too, and I think the perfect example of this was back in 2004 when President George W. Bush was facing a very difficult re-election. The economy was not going well. The wars were not going well. Remember, this was 2004. What did Karl Rove do? He distracted, created this diversionary issue of gays trying to get married. And it was a whole different climate in 2004 than it was in 2012 or 13 or 14. And that mobilized a lot of the conservative right in the southern states that really helped Bush pull out the election on a national basis. But all right, Elaine brings up, Kim, education. Who's against education? I'm pro-education. Who's against education? Let's talk about pre-K. I think it's a $1.5 billion per year diversion away from the bigger issues. Who's going to fund that? How's it going to be funded? And more importantly, it doesn't work.
Well, let's go back and talk about taxes again.
Okay.
Let's go back and talk about taxes on people like Mitt Romney, like Dick Cheney, like Warren Buffett, who is a liberal and comes out.
Or John Kerry.
You know what? My taxes shouldn't be 15-20% while my secretary's paying top tax rates.
Yeah, but most of that is because their income is from dividends.
I'm not even agreeing with that. I mean, look, if you go to Costco and you buy in quantity, you actually save money. Why is it only in the tax code? It's reversed. The more taxes you pay, the higher the rate they want you to pay at.
Yeah, and
these
by
guys
the
at
way,
the top, even look,
and
we may
Elaine-
talk about the percentage, but I'm telling you, Warren Buffett pays a lot more
all right,
millions
don't
of
talk
dollars
over
than
each
the
other. Hold
secretary.
on. Go ahead, Kent. You know?
No, I'm just saying Warren Buffett pays a lot more in taxes than the secretary. Forget the rate. He's paying millions more than she's
And
paying.
Elaine,
Don't forget
50%.
the rate.
Go ahead.
The rate is critical, Ken. You can't forget the rate.
Okay, but Elaine, 50% of the American population, because of the earned income tax credit, do not pay taxes. Are you aware of that? They don't fit. The lower 50% does not pay any tax. So isn't that something that has to be factored in?
Making a very low income not to be paying tax. By the way, I think the people that are hit the hardest are people somewhere probably making a few $100,000 a year.
I think we're in agreement there.
But, those are the people that I feel are really paying the brunt. The very, very wealthy, I mean, those who are at the bottom end of that 1%, and I want to say those of us at that very low end of the 1%.
Speak for yourself, my dear.
Who are very fortunate but are paying a large share of the taxes. And it's the very, very wealthy who are at the upper end of that 1% who are paying a much smaller percentage, and I think a much smaller share of what they should be paying. And let's
They pay
remember
40%,
something
though,
here.
Elaine.
Yeah, the volume
Maybe
The
the
volume
difference
is huge. The
Are
volume
we
is huge.
all in this as a community? Is it we have shared obligations and responsibilities
But
in this country?
Elaine, can you kill the goose that laid the golden egg? Let me give you an example. Remember the yacht tax? I remember this back in the 80s. Hey, let's go after those rich fat cats, buying all these yachts. They said, we need money. Let's just put this big tax on the yachts. What happened? They taxed it so much, people said, I'm not buying that yacht. I'm going to buy something else. The yacht businesses collapsed. Who got hurt? The guys who were making, at the time, $40,000 a year putting the screws in, the bolts into the yacht. So we've got to be careful that in our attempt to try to be fair and compassionate, which we all want to be, that you don't actually do more harm than good. Your response?
So let's bring that experience into our discussions and our debates.
Okay, fair enough.
But
Listen,
let's
let
not
me
make it extreme on each end.
Let me shift gears here. The Democrats had their retreat, the Democratic House, and they came out saying, here are our game points for the upcoming year. And one of them, again, as it was last year, the war on women. Is there a war on women here? Of course, they're going to be talking about contraception. They're going to be talking about salary. Is this, again, a manufactured political thing, just like Karl Rove did with gays back in 2004? Or is it real? To me, a war on women is the Taliban that's telling young girls that if you go to school, we're going to shoot you, as they did with Malala, okay?
Yep.
Whether or not a rich person has to pay for their contraceptive or it is provided within their insurance, I don't really think that's a war on women. Just like if we say we don't want to pay for a guy's Viagra, it's not a war on men. What's your thought about this, Ken? And then I want to go to Elaine.
I think, it can be covered by insurance, but I don't think it has to be free. The idea that it's free, or I hear liberals say, well, Viagra. Yeah, but Viagra, if it's a covered drug, I know there's copays, there's things like that. In fact, I had to pick up some medication from my wife last week. I was shocked that because it was a name brand drug, they decided, A, not to cover that one, and B, on another one, the copays were ridiculous. So, I mean, you got to be able to pay for it. And if insurance is going to cover some things, fine. There's copays. The idea that it's got to be free, there's no such thing as free. My premium went up. Forget what my premium went up. That's a separate discussion. There is no such thing as free. We're kidding ourselves.
Elaine, what do you think? Is there a real war on women here? Or
Ken, I have a question.
Yes.
Did somebody say contraceptives always have to be free?
Yes, Sandra Fluck.
That's Sandra Fluck and President Obama.
No, Sandra Fluck said that it should be covered by insurance.
Right.
So where's free contraception coming from? Yeah, where's the term?
Who said it has to be free?
I'm asking you, Elaine.
But I'm saying if you required...
I think it should be covered by insurance, but not free. And I'm asking you, who said it should be free?
Well, the concept is if it's included in insurance, your premiums are going up. So it's not a freebie that, I paid for my insurance and now it's going to be covered.
Silly. You just twisted the whole thing.
Not really.
You just said, hey, I don't think contraceptives should be free. I think they should be covered by insurance.
And by the way, there are people saying it should be free regardless of insurance.
Who said they should be free?
A lot of people.
The answer is no one.
That's not true.
The deal.
But go ahead.
I don't think so, Elaine. I think they've been talking about free, and I think we're agreeing.
As a drug that's not going to be covered when other drugs are covered.
And by the way, I don't mind if contraceptives are made available even free for lower income people, because you don't want those people getting pregnant. My qualm is when we say that it's going to be universal, just like we say universal pre-K, that in my mind doesn't work. Why are you spending good money after bad with stuff like this? Hey, I want to shift to one more thing. We got 2 minutes. There's a proposal by Steve Ballone to ticket people to have cameras as people are driving through school zones. Now, we already have the cameras when you can't make a right on red, and they've gotten $20 million now in revenue from that. Do we see this? Is this just an excuse for more revenue, or can this thing be a good thing? I know in other areas where they've done this, people went crazy where you started getting a ticket in the mail that you were going too fast, which is different than a right-hand turn. Good, Ken, give me a 30-second response, and I'm going to Elaine.
Well, I've had 2 of those happy tickets, and I looked up. I didn't see a camera on the stoplight, but it turned out it was behind, shooting at the license plate. So, was it a happy thing? I realized it looked like I was not fully stopped. So they. All right,
but now we're talking
little
about
big brother,
camera
though. Little big
hitting
brother.
you.
Yes.
If you're going 35 in a 30-mile-an-hour speed zone, you're going to be ticked at that, or
I'm going to be very ticked at that. That's
Elaine?
None of us likes to get caught when we're not following the law. And our new family photo album, I think, is me and my kids on these red light cameras. As far as the speeding goes, look, we shouldn't be speeding. Is it a little too much observation, a little bit too much being watched? It seems to me that we may not be able to do much about that. I think we're being watched when we're on the city streets, when we're speeding. I think it's going to be the future. We may not like it, but I think it's going to be the future.
I think they're going to be able...
It's not a bad thing in enforcing speed zones in school districts.
I think it's going to slow them down. The question is, are they going to take this and go to the next step, say, okay, we started with the speed zone. Is the real motive to get it everywhere? All right, we're down to 20 seconds. I want to thank Elaine Turley. Great spirited conversation, Elaine. I hope you'll come back with us again in the future weeks.
I want to talk about Adrian Esposito.
Oh, I wish you said that up front. All right, we'll get you back next week to talk about that. And Ken Greenberg's going to stay with us, and we're going to be joined by Jim Morgo. Call 451-1039. We'll see you in the next segment. Thanks, Elaine. Okay, welcome back. It's Steve Levy. You're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. Feel free to call in our last 20-minute segment here at 451-1039. We have with us in this last segment, continuing on in studio, is Ken Greenberg, who's the founder and CEO of Austin Williams Advertising and Marketing in Hauppauge. And we're joined by phone from a good friend. I mean that literally, a friend, my former chief deputy, fellow who was a mentor to me, who was the county legislator in the Sayville area before I was county legislator, was the president of the Long Island Housing Partnership, presently a consultant, all-around good guy, Jim Morgo. You on the phone, Jim?
Good afternoon, Steve. How are you?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for joining us on this day. I know we thought you were going to be en route to New England, but that's cut back short a day. So we got you on the phone to talk about a whole bunch of things in this last segment. We got Ken Greenberg in studio, so it should be...
Hiya, Ken. How are you?
Good. I was at the LIA dinner. I think it was a couple of years ago. You were getting some Lifetime Achievement Award, if I recall.
He's had about 10 Lifetime Achievement
Awards.
Awards.
Got no space on his wall.
Tells you how old you are, Jim, how long you've been around.
So you insulted me before I could be insulting myself. That's exactly what I would do.
Well, Jim,
and when you call me a mentor, I say, holy.
That's a scary thought because... Jim is you're a freaky political guy out there in that you are, I would say, a very pro-business guy. You get it when it comes to the need for businesses to prosper and the filtering down effect that has on the rest of us in the community. Yeah, you're also a pretty liberal guy in many ways. I remember you that way in the early days, and you were a great deputy county attorney. We agreed on some things, disagreed on other things, but we were a great team in getting things done, and that's what it was all about.
But, a political odd couple, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But for today, it's all about speaking our mind where we agree, disagree, who cares? It's all for the sake of discussion. I wanted to start off with, I asked everybody, who had the best week, who had the worst week? I'll start with my own. I think the best week was this guy, Tom Dale, in Nassau County, the former commissioner, who I said in my first 20 minutes, spent 2 years on the job as police commissioner and walked out with $58,000 in severance pay for unused vacation and sick. What a deal. That guy is living high. He had the best week. I would have said Nassau County taxpayers had the worst, but that would be a little too boring. I'm going to say it was Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, for the snowstorm. And, Jim, you and I can relate to this. You're in a no-win situation with these snowstorms. He did not close down the city schools, and he got pummeled for it. We were damned if you do, damned if you don't. We had, so many people calling on us from time to time. Oh, we want to have you call a state of emergency. Not, it was always a tough thing. So those are my two guys. Jim, did you come up with two?
Well, I was thinking of Mitch McConnell having a bad week because he voted, which I obviously think is the responsible thing to do, to raise the debt ceiling, to pay bills that are already incurred, and he's getting killed by the Tea Party.
Well, I want to get back to that, and there's pros and cons to that. I know what they wanted to do.
I got a big question on that, though. I've never understood it. If we know that we have to raise the debt ceiling to pay the bills that we already incurred, why do we allow the budget increase to go beyond the debt ceiling?
Well, that's
why isn't the debt ceiling together with the budget?
I'm going to hold both of you guys off because our phones are lighting up. I got 3 on the line. Here we go. We have. Oh, wait. They're ringing, but they're just on hold with our producer. We're going to put them in a second. All right, so we'll go back to you guys, Jim and Ken.
Steve, I wanted to react to something you said about me being freaky. I think it was Bill Cosby said, the only thing that fits in a pigeonhole is a pigeon. So
I like that.
Yeah, well, I think when you've done some work from a management position, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, things are not always as they appear. That you seldom have white and black.
You're right. We're all kind of a mix. I'd say most people on Long Island are kind of like a mix of fiscal conservatism and social moderation. I think you're right. We've got John from Yaphank on the line. John, are you with us? All right, we're going to try one more time. John from Yaphank.
Yeah, hi, Steve.
There we go. Hiya, John.
How are you?
Very well, very well. What's on your mind? You've been listening to the show.
Well, I've been listening to the show, and I think, I guess there's the issues with Obamacare and the Long Island economy. I think we're unfairly taxed and burdened with the cost of these things.
Do you run a business, John? Are you in a business that you've seen the impact or feel you may see the impact?
I'm in a business where with over 100 employees, and there's been a dramatic increase in the cost of providing that health care.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I know we got Ken Greenberg here. Thanks, John. You're welcome to hang on and comment further if you like, or just listen in from afar. But Ken, you have a firm of about 35 members. You won't come on. You're under the 50 threshold, but you're still feeling the impact of healthcare costs. What's going on with that?
Well, at the point that Obamacare passed, we noticed a greater increase in premium than we had seen in prior years. So this is the getting ready because it wasn't in effect completely. Although you have to remember, New York State has sort of been like Obamacare before Obamacare. We had long ages for children to be on the policy. I think it was already like 26 or had been raised to some.
Yeah, under Patterson's tenure, Governor Patterson, it was raised to 26 before Obamacare.
And we had no pre-existing conditions for a long time. So our premiums have been higher than most other states. But I would say in the last 3 years, our premiums are up at least 150, 160%.
Which is contrary to the line from the administration that the Affordable Care Act has actually slowed the increases of health care. You've seen the opposite.
Totally. And then that was getting ready. Now it passed, and so October 1st comes in. And if you remember, there was a lot of news about the individual policies getting canceled for being inadequate. And, the liberals would say that was only 5% of the population, although it was 15 million people. Next night, I get a letter at home. I have a group plan with 20 people in it. And my group plan coverage, I'm getting told, is getting canceled. I came in the next morning to ask my CFO if she got it. We all got it.
And now you've been a big advocate. I want to get back to this in a little bit after I go back to Jim. But you've been an advocate in trying to make sure that small businesses are able to pool and get the kind of benefits that the big companies do. I want to get back to that. But Jim, are you back with us?
Yeah, I somehow got cut off.
I know we got cut off, but we've been talking a little bit about Obamacare. And the one thing I wanted to broach to you as my former chief deputy, you'll appreciate this. Now, President Obama, he's been getting some praise and criticism for these extensions he's been doing unilaterally. Could you imagine if I had tried to unilaterally change a lot of county policy the way the president is doing? They would have hung me by my thumbs in the lobby of the Dennison building.
Your thumbs?
Yeah, well, let's just say my thumbs for the moment. What's your thoughts on the whole thing, on Obamacare in general? If he's doing the right thing, is he constitutionally protected in doing this? And the latest one, which blew my mind, is now telling businesses, you can't dip below the 100 employee threshold without us approving it first, or we'll hold you in contempt. It's just crazy. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, I remember you are doing several executive orders.
Yes.
And not to be an Obama apologist.
But not to change, but not where we were changing a previous law.
Well, he's only done them where he could. He's done fewer than any president since Eisenhower. So
that is true. But now, you have to look at the substance of it.
I think it's a different use of an executive order than we've seen in the past.
Well, President Bush certainly had some far-reaching executive orders, justifiably in reaction to September 11th of 2001. But nevertheless, it's what we were talking about before.
Well, we were talking about the best and the worst of the week and all.
Yeah, but people want to characterize and make things easy. I like some of the things the president does. I don't like some things he does, but I hate the way people vilify him and try to put him in a whole socialist, super liberal. I wish the heck we had a single pay medical program where we really had the government's not involved, not running this. Insurance companies are.
Well, so you have a solution as well, at least. And I in my first segment, I gave the Democrats and the president kudos for stepping up to the plate and at least trying something, because it's unacceptable to have 45 million uninsured Americans. The question is whether his is the right way to go. The Republicans, I don't think, have had a very vocal alternative. They talk about being able to go between state lines. But I think if you look at, what we have to do is look at what is different here in the United States as opposed to other industrialized countries that has us paying twice as much per person. And some of the things I look at is, number one, we have a lot fewer doctors per population. I don't know why we don't have more medical schools and crank out more doctors to create more competition. That's number one. Number two, I really think that the lawsuits and defensive medicine plays a huge role in
agree with that.
Separates us from the rest of the country. What ticks me off is that President Obama, at the very outset of talking about reform, says we're taking that off the table. There's
I know. Yeah, that ticked me off too. That's exactly right. The incredible cost for malpractice insurance, the need for tort reform,
and the last 6 months of life. I mean, here in this country, so I asked a couple of doctors I know, what do you think is a major factor in high costs here in America? The last 6 months in life is so much money spent in that really doesn't amount to anything. And in general, we prescribe far more medications than any other place around the world.
Right.
And when they try to control this, they say, oh, it's a death panel, or, you're throwing grandma off the cliff. Both sides are guilty on that. But Ken, you're there in the trenches with a business. What do you think the solution is? Jim says single payer. There's a lot of folks out there, mostly on the liberal and the left, say that's the way to go. And you say what?
Steve, if I may just interrupt, but one thing that you have to look at is perspective. First of all, when the Romney Care came into Massachusetts, which is essentially the same thing, the Heritage Foundation's, not exactly a liberal group's plan, it was rocky. It's working better now. And I'm not so old to remember when Social Security came in, but I am old enough to remember Medicare. Both of those were, people screamed about them, how horrible they were.
Barry Goldwater called it socialism, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they were wrong.
Yeah, and so it's one of the things that you and I have talked about several times is the offline kind of 24-hour news cycle and the need to get instant analysis. A lot of times, and again, this is probably a sign of my age, you got to take a long view and get some perspective. And yeah, there are things wrong with it, and they should be changed. But as you said, I didn't hear you at the beginning, but you said that we shouldn't be spending what we're spending, and no American citizen should be without any health coverage.
That's for sure. But I think one of the problems, and I want to get to you on this, Ken, is that, I think the big problem was the selling of it as you're going to keep your doctor, you're going to keep your insurance, you're not going to lose it. Now you have 5 million people who get this notice saying you're gone, you can't keep it. And Ken,
that's 5 million that had individual policies. Add guys like me who are in group plans. I think you're probably talking 100 million.
And that hasn't
as
hit
the
yet.
months roll. I mean,
that's why they extended it. By the way,
they're not even talking enough about that. But look, I don't personally want to see single payer, and I'll tell you why I don't want to see single payer. Just look at what they spent on a website. I mean, we do websites. We do websites that connect to legacy backends. They're very complicated. We run whole universities. I don't think I've done one for more than $200,000. Now, when something this big, maybe it's got to be bigger. But $634 million, the most expensive website in the world, because this is our government spending money that's not even real money to them. And if you look at we could say great things about Social Security and Medicare. What about the unfunded liabilities? There's no gap accounting in the federal government. I mean, if you or me as a business tried to run our books the way they did, was, we're making money here. Forget this $95 trillion on the side.
You can say it's working well and it's solvent when you don't have to balance your books. But I know with Social Security, I'm not saying, get rid of it. It's a great program. But when it started, you had 16 workers for everyone collecting. Now you have 3 or 4 workers.
Oh, that's right.
At some point, you've got to make a change here.
The math doesn't work.
We need more young people having children.
Ken, who was your winner and who was your, I don't want to say loser, who had the best week, who had the worst week?
Okay, well, one's not a person exactly. I noticed that there was a story about the Long Island 7-Eleven stores are the top performers in the chain of 7-Eleven, including the one in Montauk where, half the people are there are divided. Should they even have a 7-Eleven? It's extremely successful.
They don't want it, but when it's there, boy, they use it.
They get their coffee twice a day. So anyways, that was good, I guess, for them. And then I feel a little like Chris Christie's taking a little heat again, because then there were some other stories, some former New Jersey prosecutor wrote some letter he's trying to open up another 43-count indictment. There was a 43-count indictment in 2010 against the county sheriff, and it was dropped by the attorney general. I guess it was Was that a
Christie friend, the attorney general?
Christie friend, the whole thing. And so even though there was a grand jury, looked like there was reason to go forward, they sort of suddenly abandoned the investigation last August. So this guy writes a letter now, let's reopen it. So
Chris
on
Christie's
the
still
tales
having
of
his
Bridgegate, the poor guy, he's getting it again.
Hey, Jim, I want to ask you as an Italian-American, okay, did you see the unbelievable story written for the New Republic over the last week? This guy's been all over the talk circuit. They did a killer story against Christie that this isn't new, this is who he is, blah, blah, blah. I think that was unfair, but beyond it, they actually had him dressed in his underwear and his robe at the front of his driveway as though he was Tony Soprano picking up his newspaper.
We don't want to see that in the news.
Did you? I don't know if you saw this, but I mean, it was definitely an implication here that Christie, an Italian American, look, we'll make the connection to Jersey and Italian Americans, as in Tony Soprano. Did you hear about this or take offense to it? Did you see this article?
I didn't see it, but I'm taking offense now.
But what do you think about the whole Christie thing? Is this overblown? Is it legitimate? Or has it been a double standard here as to how they treat Christie vis-a-vis, well, Obama saying he didn't know about the NSA. He didn't know about the website.
The read it in the papers line.
Yeah, he didn't know about the IRS. Is there a double standard here?
I think Christie is saying he didn't know, and I for one, taking him at his word.
But is the media treating him differently than how they treat Obama, who says, I didn't know about all these other stuff happening? Benghazi.
Fox treats them pretty well, as a matter of fact.
Well, that got the phones ringing, Steve.
They're lighting up.
Ken, where is that? Where was that 7-Eleven story? Because I got called on that, and I never saw it.
It was actually in Newsday.
I didn't see it in the print version. Sometimes it's just on the
Newsday.com.
I think it was on the .com version, Jim.
Because that really talks to you about competition. The reason the 7-Eleven is in Montauk is the biggest seller is because there are no others around it.
Mm-hmm. I remember at one point, Jim, you'll get a kick at this. It was I think the number one was in our old district. It was either on Concom or Bohemia. Number one in the nation. That's incredible. The number one
you would think
7-Eleven
an urban 7-Eleven, just from density, would be busier than Montauk.
No, but you know what? As Jim said, there's so many other places to go
in
an urban area. You don't have to go to 7-Eleven. When you don't have a lot around you, that's the place to go.
So they should put a Starbucks and a
the
Dunkin' Donuts in Montauk and give these guys a run for the
As
money.
you said, people don't want them until they're there. Then they go to them.
Not a bad idea. Hey, Jim, also as a former teacher, okay, we got about 3 minutes to go here. I saw this article just today or yesterday. Nassau County spending $3 million to put panic alarms within their schools in case there's an intruder. Now, if you would have told me this 10, 15 years ago, I'd say, okay, makes sense. Just like we did in the county with a victim of domestic violence, you don't have to run to a phone booth. But now the kids themselves have cell phones. Everybody's got a cell phone. Why do you need to spend $3 million for these panic alarms to get a cop there? Is this just fluff by politicians trying to show that they're doing something after Sandy Hook? Or can you see some value in this?
You know, Steve, when the county executive came up with the idea, it's really a difficult one to argue with, because why are people here on Long Island? Because of their love of their children and the schools. However, when I read the same article, I asked myself, well, as I guess a kind of a wonk, I said, well, how was the procurement done? Was there a request for proposal for this? Mm-hmm. And Worldwide Security is a company that's going to be supplying these panic alarms. I know nothing about them, but I was curious. Is the CEO a big contributor? Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of things having,
good questions,
I guess, in the
Jim.
system.
Good questions.
You would think $3 million couldn't be spent on something. And it's just like pre-K to me. Look, if it works, spend it. But and I don't want to mix this up because we only have 2 minutes left for that debate. But here, spend the $3 million, Nassau County, if it's actually going to save a kid.
If it's going to save one child's life.
But it's not. You're not going to get the 911 any faster than having a cell phone and doing it.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jim. If you everybody's walking around with cell phones, it's less of a. You think there'd be less of a need than it was a few years ago. For sure.
Steve said, this is something you wear around your neck. It's not like something that's going to be right in the school. I don't think.
But or it might be in the principal's office or whatever. But it's my mind. If you're going to have to run back to the office to press a button, you probably have your cell phone, your BlackBerry, your smartphone right on your hip. So I think again, this is just another one of those feel-good measures that was a knee-jerk reaction, and we have too much of that in government. And you add all of this little stuff.
Money doesn't
really
seem real.
Money
does not seem real.
Well, it's also so often, maybe not this one, maybe this one, but it's an elected official wanting to show that he's doing something, and something that's non-controversial.
Right.
Something, I want to save the lives of children. What could be more admirable than that?
Well, hey, Jim, I want to thank you for joining us by phone this time. I know you were good enough to say that you'll come in a future session in studio for a full hour. That will be a lot of fun. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Appreciate you joining us.
Good talking with you.
And Ken Greenberg, the CEO and founder of
Austin and
Williams Advertising and Marketing. Thanks for joining us. They will have you back as well. Yeah. And thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this week on Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. We want you to join us again next week and every week thereafter, Saturdays live 2 to 4. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.